Hey everybody, it's Mr. Rogers, and we're gonna quickly go over some um, things about labs and how we run experiments in science and in biology. And um, I'm gonna quickly go over this because this is something, hopefully, in science you've been getting parts of your whole entire science career, and this shouldn't be anything new. And so I'm gonna kind of hit on some things that I see kids really, really, really struggle with in my class, and we'll try to get better. And this is not the last time we'll cover any of this. Like every time we basically cover our lab, we're going to be talking about something to do with lab construction, how we run experiments. So, one of the big ones, the ones that we struggle with the most consistently on tests and things like that, national tests like ACT, SAT, and M-step and stuff like that, is variables. And so, in an experiment, a variable is anything that you can actually change. Okay, anything that you can change. And there's two kinds of variables. There's an independent variable and there's a dependent variable. And the dependent variable depends on the independent variable. So, for example, I'm growing some seeds, growing some plants. And there's really two variables that I'm controlling. I'm controlling how long the experiment's going to happen. So maybe I'm going to measure them for a month, and we're measuring how tall they are or tall they get. And the independent variable, the one I don't really have a control over, I mean, I can pick how long we're going to do it, is time. But you guys can't like slow down time or speed up time. It's independent of you. It's something that is not controllable. Okay. Besides just choosing how long. Dependent variable depends on an independent variable. Okay, what it means by that is like how tall that plant's going to get depends on how long we let the time go. And so it depends on it. So if I go for 30 days, it's going to be a little bit different if I go for 3 days, and so on and so forth. So dependent variable depends on the independent variable. Dependent variable is truly what we're kind of measuring in an experiment. It's the thing that has a direct change. It's the thing that we're trying to see if there is something going on in the experiment. So dependent variables really, really, really important. So a variable, like I said, something we manipulate or change in an experiment. Dependent variable, it's a variable that changes the result of independent. It's a variable that is measured and recorded. It's the one that we're really, really, really going for. Now, not to keep talking before I get to the next slide, I guess. Um, but the dependent variable also is really super important in graphing, and I'll show you when we get to graphing. So, the other things that we struggle with experiments is something called a constant and control. A constant is a variable that does not change through the entire experiment. A value remains similar. Okay. So, for example, if I'm doing the plant experiment, a constant would be how much sunlight I'm giving. I'm going to give every plant the same amount of sunlight. Okay. Same plant, same amount of sunlight. The control is the group or condition that is used for basis of comparison results. So let's do a different experiment. I'm trying to figure out if um a certain color, or how about this? We'll do an experiment. What kind of music do plants like? What music do plants grow the best to? And so we'll have one plant have rap music, one plant have country music, one plant have rock music, and so on and so forth. Everything else has to be constant in that setup. The control is I'm going to need a plant to be growing with no music whatsoever. It needs to be no music because I need to compare those plants that had music, not just to themselves, but to somebody that doesn't have music. So the control is somebody that is a simplified version experiment that kind of removes um, the condition a little bit to the point where it's a baseline, if that makes sense. It's a baseline experiment. So for another example, if I'm trying to see, oh, I don't know, what fourth grader is the fastest fourth grader in Kalkaska, and I'm running them through this race or whatever. A control group is I might have a third grader or fifth grader run it to see what time they have. Because maybe we'll find out the fastest fourth grader is super slow, or maybe we'll find out that the race is impossible, or there's something going on in the fourth grade class comparatively to what is standard. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. You can also have a control in that situation be an Elk Rapids kid, because I said the fastest one in Kalkaska. So you have options for controls. So a control experiment is when there is one independent variable being tested at a time. We're only changing one thing about the experiment. We want to limit how much we're actually doing. So going back to like the plants listening to the music analogy here, or the experiment example, if I'm trying to see which music changes the plant growth the most, and I also water them different and give them different amounts of light and treat them differently, otherwise, I'm really not proving anything. So I have to completely eliminate all other variables, all other things. Everything else needs to be controlled, and we only have one change. We just want one thing that's slightly different. And that's sometimes hard to do, and it's sometimes impractical, because with plants, say I'm doing this with 5 tomato plants. Well, one of the tomato plants could just be not that great of a tomato plant. Maybe, it doesn't have the greatest DNA, or maybe another plant it's faster growing. And that's where repeating experiments over and over and over again is super important, or having large number experiments where we don't just test one plant listening to rap music, we're testing hundreds. Now, another thing that my students have been struggling with lately is hypothesis. And this is something that you actually talk all the way back in like second grade about. It's actually a second grade science word now, but we struggle with it. And I think a lot of it has not to do so much with you guys, but how you're taught what a hypothesis is. So, a hypothesis is a stated outcome for what an experiment could possibly end up as. So, people always like to say it's like an educated guess type thing. Um, I'm not a big fan of the idea of educated guess, because it means for you guys just assume that means I'm taking a wild stab at it. No, when I write a hypothesis, I've done research into the experiment. I've thought about it. I really considered what could possibly happen. What makes sense for what I know. It's not me saying, you know what, I guess it might rain tomorrow. No, the equivalent would be me researching on weather.com about the weather tomorrow, going outside, looking at the sky, maybe reflecting back. Oh, has anything changed in the weather the last couple of days? And then making a hypothesis. That's an educated guess, not just randomly deciding. Okay. So you will see I have an example here. If a super ball is dropped from increasing heights, then the ball height will also increase, because you will see there two or three really big things. One, it's an if then statement. And the if part is kind of what's going on in the experiment. The then is what you kind of think is going to happen. And then the because is the reasoning. We just did claim, evidence, and reasoning the last couple of days. So here you have the experiment, the result, and then the reasoning. So formatting a hypothesis: one, it's if, then, because. So, for example, you did a homeostasis lab just yesterday. If I increase my exercise, then my heart rate will increase, because I need more blood going to my extremities, or because I need more oxygen, or because my cells are starved for food. There's a lot of different options there, but each one is a solid answer. Now, your hypothesis can be completely wrong. Don't feel like you have to be right. Like, you at the end of the experiment, most experiments fail, or they not actually prove anything. But a hypothesis has to be written correctly. And a hypothesis also needs to be in third person. It does not use I or we or anything like that. So it wouldn't be like, if we drop a super ball, or if we uh, exercise outside and check our, you know, pulse, no, it's always in third person. If someone does something, then this will happen because of this. And it's hard because I think even in my example a couple minutes ago, I said I am pretty sure, reflecting back. So it's hard to do. And even I slip into it. So we got to try to do third person, no I's or we's. So graphs. We're going to do a lot of graphs. And obviously, being at home, it's going to be a little difficult because you're going to have to graph it, take a picture, and send it in, that type of thing. But we'll get through that. We'll get through that together. And we graph because it's a good representation of what went on in the experiment. I can sit there and read pages and pages and pages of data, or I can look at a good, well-structured graph and get the same amount of information a lot quicker, and something that is a lot more visually, it's better evidence for a claim. Okay, so there's different graphs we're going to be making: line graphs, bar graphs, pie charts, but really you're going to be focusing on line and bar. I'm assuming you guys have made line and bar graphs before. Line graphs are to the right, kind of show a trend. Bar graphs are usually used for amounts, to show different amounts. And then pie graphs are for percentages of a whole. So we're usually going to use a line graph, to be honest. Bar graphs are okay for amount type purposes, but line graphs is what we're shooting for because it shows a trend. And if you use math class, trends are important. It's what you have. I mean, you talk about it a ton in algebra with y equals mx plus b and whatnot. So graphs are important. Now, what's kind of fun about graphs is you already kind of know how you're going to construct it if you know what your independent and dependent variable is. So first, all graphs are going to have a title. We usually title graphs the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So the effect of the x-axis on the y-axis. Okay. You have the y-axis is always the dependent variable. The x-axis is always the independent variable. This is even in bar graphs, by the way. This is not just in line graphs. And then sometimes if we need to, we can have a key for what line is what line. So for an example, in this situation, there's two lines. So I have to say, what is the blue line? What is the red line? If there's only one line, you should be okay. Now, for each axis, you'll see that there's different things there. One, you need a title for each one, which is the labels. Unit measures, that's more important in chemistry and physics, but it wouldn't be a bad idea if it's a measurement, especially if it's like a height type thing. You'd put like centimeters or something like that. You want to make sure the graph is fair. And what I mean by fair is you're being honest with it. Sometimes people make graphs look really, really, really bad for a particular thing or really, really good for a particular thing. No, we want to make sure we scale it right and we show a result accurately and honestly. And then we also use consistent increments. It's part of the honesty thing. We don't make the gap between 5 and 10 a lot smaller than 10 to 15, because that's not a good representation of our data. So that's it. That's the things I think people struggle with the most. The ideas of variables and controls, hypothesis, and graphing. So yesterday you guys talked about some of these. So if you want to go back and look at your lab real quick and make sure that you did a good job on all these things and you followed the rules, that'd be an awesome way to do that. If not, if you don't really follow the rules, I'll actually return your lab to you so you can fix some of the things. You're going to keep practicing. Today you're going to do a hypothesis worksheet, and tomorrow you're going to do some things about just general experiment things. You're more than welcome to use the internet to try to figure out which is the different things if you want to. But for the most part, I think you guys can get it and you can understand. So I hope it goes well. If you need help, obviously I'm always around. I can help you out. So have a great night and great day. Talk to you guys later.